So yeah, this is a video, do you know what, I've never really done before, which is quite weird, isn't it, actually, for me. I'm not, obviously a big fan of woody and green generally, but I do have quite a few woody and green scents. So yeah, this makes a good interesting video, doesn't it? And as you can see from the title, it's just about kind of summer spring forest scents. Now over here in the UK, the weather is, it's quite something, so we get a nice mixture of hot and cold and obviously very wet quite often. And so I'm going to go through some in my collection that have that, and this time it's not going to be, there is one or two more florally scents in there, but actually for me it's it's missed them out really. So yeah, let's get in. So first up is an Amouage, and it's a newer one, and it's Amouage Myths Man. Now this is it's not one you'd immediately think I'd go for, but it was a really good price. But the reason this is kind of beautiful for this kind of foresty, summery, springy setting is this one is there's a chrysanthemum note quite early on, which is quite prominent. That, that kind of green. How would you describe a chrysanthemum? A kind of green, not bitter, but slightly kind of going on that with a kind of yellow tinge to it. And I don't know where chrysanthemums grow, because they don't grow in the UK, do they? But there's also there's not many listed green notes in there actually, but it does have a kind of sweet green tinge about it as well as there's obviously woods and resins, and the elemi gives it the specific kind of sweet, sort of citrusy kind of through it all. But the magic of this one is the smoke and the ash. It smells like, there's been burning woods, burning forests, the forest has been cleared or something like that, and it literally is like smelling ash. It's quite beautiful really, and it's it's a fantastic fragrance. And there's also a nice woody vetiver that kind of comes through it, and obviously as it's an Amouage it develops and changes. Again, the opening is quite a bit, but yeah, that's Amouage Myths Man. Next up is Thomas O'Brien's creation. He's like a reviewer on YouTube who created his own fragrance, and that's Thorne. Charlie, get out, look at the dog. But yeah, that's called Thorne, and look at all these bluebells. That is a kind of spring or autumn forest. It's more, to me, it's more been, oh, I can smell the wild garlic. Oh look, it's all over. Yeah, you sort of stood on the outside of a forest just going into it, and it's got all these kind of damp woods, damp leaves kind of smell, but they're really filling the air. I mean, here it smells, as you can imagine, absolutely magnificent. Look at these bluebells. But yes, it's beautiful. And it obviously a fawn, a kind of mischievous woodland creature dancing from tree to tree, and it's brilliant for that. And it's one of the more greener fragrances I absolutely adore. And yeah, that's all I really need to say about it. It's a lovely kind of green foresty fragrance. So that's Thorne from Thomas O'Brien. Next up is from Frederick Mall, and it's one of their very famous ones, and it's Promise, or the Promise. Now that one is predominantly, it's about this kind of this apple, this over fermented apple, and the lovely kind of sharp rose in it. Somehow they're two notes I don't normally love, but in this fragrance they work absolutely magnificently together. They are like a perfect marriage, and there's a nice leatheriness running through it. But also one of the keynotes, if not the keynote, is the cypriol, which we all know is this, to me, is a dank, dark green, very woody, sort of like a root of a tree, if you like, that's surrounded in kind of green moss, and it can go very greeny and what have you on me. And that mixed with some saffron and some leather makes it kind of, if you like, it's a forest after a massive downpour, like a hideous, you know, semi-flood kind of downfall, and everywhere is soaked, the woods are soaked, and that's what you can smell. It's quite a beautiful fragrance, really. Yeah, I mean, what more do I need to say about that? That's the promise from Frederick. Next is another indie brand, and that's from Haboo fragrances, and that's called Haboo. And this one is not really supposed to represent a forest, but it's what I kind of get. There's a lovely, beautiful, rich, gorgeous, woody rosewood running through it, and that gives me these smells. And again, there's also a kind of orangey, dark orangey fruitiness running through it, mixing with the woods. Now again, it's not often we get fruit trees in our woods here. They'd all be pilfered and stolen probably, but for the sake of it, we're saying there are these kind of sweet, juicy, dark fruits in amongst the woods, and there's a nice kind of warm spiciness about it. And that warm spiciness kind of adds to, and it creates a kind of musky, nose tickly kind of warm in a nice way kind of fragrance. And yeah, the dark oranges, the rosewoods create a perfect kind of hot summer forest. So that's Haboo from Haboo. Next up is a very creamy woody fragrance. Again, not one, there are always exceptions, aren't there? I'm not the biggest sandalwood lover, and I wouldn't wear it on a warm day. And sometimes I'm in the mood for it. It's a very milky lactose. Sorry, that's Piano Santal from La Costa Parfums, which is a French company. And yes, it's delightful. It's just basically creamy, milky, lactonic woods with a little dash of spice. And the sandalwood has also a little bit of a woody edge. And obviously we don't have sandalwood trees here, but I can imagine walking around a kind of similar forest, probably a tropical forest, isn't it, where some of the sandalwood trees have fallen down, and that kind of warm, smooth sandalwood has been baking in the heat, and it kind of fills the air and fills your nostrils. It's a very comforting one, whereas here the woods and the smells are very, very green, damp, sweetness from the bluebells, the wild garlic mainly as well, and that's kind of what we get in this country. But to me, in my head, a kind of tropical one has these sweet, milky woods, and I think it's a great fragrance for that. So that's Piano Santal, L'Orchestre. Next up is from Mugler, and it's Mugler's Alien Man. Now obviously this was the fragrance that kind of helped trigger all this, because simply it wasn't alien, and I was disappointed, so I wanted to buy more and more fragrances. Of course it wasn't alien. Jolly! It was look at him down there. But this one, actually, the more I've spent time with it, the more I've got to know it, I actually quite like it. It's a kind of dark pine. Say that's the main note, vetiver. There's a kind of anisey thing to it. I'm not sure, is it tarragon that's in it or something like that? And there's obviously a nice muskiness about it. And so it's a mixture between this kind of woody pine and a kind of green pine needles thing in there. So obviously it's got that signature cashmere and base, but it doesn't smell anything like the alien. But it is a kind of a weird forest. I wouldn't say it's an alien forest, but it's kind of a weirder one, and it's just very nice. Obviously it's the dill, it's the herbs, that kind of what people didn't like about this, but that just gives a bit more of a greenness to it. So yeah, something when Mugler, probably the last creative one Mugler made, isn't it, I suppose. And maybe because it didn't do so well, they all went mega generic and awful. But yes, that's Mugler's Alien Man. Next up is Dior. I don't seem to have a list nowadays like Dior, and that's Oud Rosewood. Now I think we all know I am exceptionally fond of this fragrance. It is again back to rosewood. So you imagine big noble forests and dark trees and a kind of sweet elegant woodiness about it, which is where rosewood kind of takes me. And again there's another raspberry in it, which can be a bit of a forest fruit, can't it? It's an interesting, beautiful fruitiness. And this is a dead end. So, and there's the leathery note in it, and again it may be a more forbearing dark forest with big dark trees and little naughty illicit fruits like the raspberry and that in there, you know, like a Hansel and Gretel kind of little red white riding hood woods. So yeah, that's Oud Rosewood from Dior. And finally, how could it be a list of mine without this in? No, not really, this does suit it, is Tom Ford's Noir de Noir. Now this is that kind of Transylvanian forest. I know Transylvania is not famous for that, it's a very beautiful country, isn't it, and what have you, but it's got the dark truffles growing in this kind of haunted, eerie forest. There's little black roses that you can prick yourself on. There's this kind of sweet, intoxicating red smell in there as well as the little hints of an oud accord and the dark woods and the very earthy patchouli like this. It just all together creates that scenario, doesn't it, of being chased or stalked through some creepy woods, you know, the branches hanging down and catching your skin, releasing that blood for the bats and vampires to smell. And it just, again, it's all together another beautiful kind of foresty scent. So that's Tom Ford's Noir de Noir. Yes, this was a very short video for me. Just going through a few woody ones. I know some of them they're fairly brief descriptions, but I've got descriptions here, there and everywhere, and there are good reviews. I've even done single reviews of some of them, so believe it or not. So yeah, there's lots of better stuff kicking about, but they're my kind of summery woody fragrances. Obviously throughout the years I think the changes of woods do smell when you're walking through a place like this, and they do have very different smells. Obviously, like I say, at the moment we've got the bluebells and the wild garlic mainly here, which has taken over the greenness a bit, but early spring it's kind of green and yellowy smelling, and in summer start to get more of the purple coming through, and even perhaps sometimes, if you're lucky, some fruits. So yeah, don't need to waffle on. What about you? What's your favourite kind of foresty fragrance for the warmer weather? He's useful, isn't he? Do you have any that you wear all year round? Do any kind of woody, foresty ones take you to magical, mystical places? Alright folks, thanks, bye.